Welcome to the Sports Entrepreneurs Podcast. I'm your host, Marcus Luhr, and I'm excited to have a fellow YPOer and my first female executive finally on the call here this morning, very early morning from New York City, Mrs. Stacey Allaster. Welcome to the podcast, Stacey.
Good morning, Marcus. Thanks for having me. I'm glad we finally could connect.
Yeah, no, I'm excited, and I'm looking forward to digging deep into your amazing career and talking more tennis. I had Rainer Schüttler recently on it, and of course that was from a player perspective. So I'd really looking forward to digging deeper. Tennis was always my first love as sport too, so I can talk tennis all day. But before we get into all that, let me quickly introduce you a bit further for some of the folks who might not know you that well. So your career, you're originally from Canada, and your career started in Canada. It was Tennis Canada. For quite a long period, for 15 years, you worked with Tennis Canada on many events, and we'll probably go into that a bit more later, Rogers Cup, etc. And then where most people would probably recognize you from, of course, is your near tenure with the WTA, the Women's Tour, both as initially president and later on chairman and CEO. And of course, you did an amazing job there. And we'll definitely dig into that. And of course, you're right now the CEO of the USTA, which is the host of the US Open. And that will be the other part of the conversation of you guys have recently announced that the tournament will go on, and therefore there will be some interesting topics there. And I'd like to congratulate you. I believe you are the first female tournament director in the history of the U.S. Open after 140 years, about time, I would say. So congratulations to that.
I think so, yeah. Thank you very much.
So I believe that was fairly recently announced. So that's all good stuff. But let's get back to where you started before we jump too far ahead here. So please tell us a bit about how you got into tennis, why tennis, and all that good stuff.
Sure. I was in the 8th grade, growing up on the border of Niagara Falls, Canada, and Niagara Falls, New York, just to give people a sense. So living right on the border.
Nice.
And there was a provincial program from the Ontario Tennis Association where they were giving out scholarships to 8th graders for the summer to encourage participation. And so I got a racket, 6 weeks of lessons at the community club, and a membership at the community club.
All right.
And so from that, I never left tennis.
Wow.
So it changed my life.
It sure did.
And everything I have in my professional life has come from the sport, which is a huge driver for me when we talk about, what's your passion, what's your purpose.
Yes.
For me, it really primarily is using professional tennis assets to generate the funds to be able to promote and grow the game to change kids' lives.
Right.
I think when we think about how sport can change kids' lives, whether that be all the life lessons that youth learn outside of the classroom, they are invaluable in life and in business. From strategy to winning to losing, etc.
Yes.
And it is a high data point. Young girls who are physically active, it is healthy for their self-esteem, builds teamwork, and as well those that are in the competitive stream of sport. More than 50% of female leaders, have played competitive sport. Oh, yeah. And the few that we do have as Fortune 500 CEOs did play competitive sport. And
I like the statistics there.
It can provide a great career on and off the court. And my journey was off the court. I was a good little club player. I started teaching when I was 16. Right. And so that was the beginning of general management because you learned communication skills, how to build your junior program. And just from there, it kind of never stopped. And it was then a stepping stone after I graduated. I read What They Don't Teach You at the Harvard Business School. And by Mark McCormick, the founder of sports marketing. And I really thought I wanted to be an agent.
All right.
Honestly, I'm glad that wasn't the path.
Well, I had a few agents on the podcast before. So
it is a hard path, especially I would think now. So I started at the OTA, running around the province, giving free tennis lessons at community clubs. Ironically, the dots connected to the journey, to the entry point.
Yeah, nice.
And selling membership, and then I was head of player development, and I wanted to work at Tennis Canada.
Right.
And I knocked on their door 3 times, and 3 times they didn't select me, but I was born with some pretty good gifts from my grandmothers and my mother, and perseverance genes, resilience genes. No means yes in my mindset. It just means it's not yes right now. So I did get in, and that was a 15-year where I did run the Rogers Cup Canadian Open, and I was in charge of sales and marketing for both the Toronto and the Montreal events. And that's where the profile and the opportunity of the international stage came, where I represented the Tennis Canada at ATP meetings, WTA meetings, ITF. I started to get on the board of WTA, and they came knocking in 2001. And my husband and I, we were in the midst of adopting our first child from Siberia, and so that just wasn't the right time. And we adopted our second child in 2004, and then in 2005, Larry Scott joined me, or asked me to join him, and to be his president. And I did. So that ended the 15 years at Tennis Canada. We moved to the States. That was big. It's just us here living in St. Petersburg, Florida, leaving the family behind with just the 2 kids.
Right.
And here we are today. And 10 years later, everything that we did at the WTA, from growth, the business grew, prize money grew 100% for the athletes, and then it's almost 30 years of really kind of working in tennis. So I thought at that point I was finished with tennis. That was a good run, and I was on a path to actually go and teach at an MBA school, take over as the director of a sports management MBA program at a university, do some consulting, do some charity work for youth sport, and maybe take a breath. But the USTA came knocking, gave me about 3 months, and they put it out there. Stace, we don't have anyone to run pro tennis, and no one knows pro tennis more from a federation perspective, a pro perspective, the linkage between player development. And, if you're the little kid who watched the U.S. Open, and in Tennis Canada, I had the U.S. Open poster. I tried to emulate how they presented the sport from a product perspective. And you're given the opportunity to oversee the largest annual sporting event in the world. As long as we didn't have to move, we were good to do it. So 4 years now at the USTA, and I'm having a great time. We have to love what we do.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, I'm a lifer. I'm a lifer in tennis, even though I've tried a variety of different times to go on a different path. The diversification has come through the portfolio, and it's still
it's a good spot to be.
Day.
Absolutely. We actually represented the USTA for about 8 years, from 2004 to 2012. We represented the TV rights here in Asia. Obviously, that was before your time. So I've been to the event several times, sat in the suites and stuff, and it's amazing. I have to admit, obviously had a bit of a chance to take a look behind the scene, being a partner of the event. I love the U.S. Open, and we'll come back to that. But I wanted to spend a little bit of time at the WTA first. As you mentioned, and I've read at least, there was in the number used in the article was billions of dollars of new revenue coming in during your during your time. Tell us a bit what happened. What were the changes you made, which you felt this is really you doing it, versus, of course, also having amazing players, maybe the Sharapovas and the Williams sisters and others coming online, which I'm sure had a bit to do with it as well. So, love to hear your perspective on that.
Well, I think it's similar to any industry. It's the foundation of the business. You have your core markets, mature markets. and where are the new markets for growth.
Right.
And we opened an office in 2009 in Beijing. Okay. And that was all part of a structural change on the calendar, which you could look at as sort of product. And we put one of our largest 4 events in Beijing. And when we were working with the government, we said that we wanted to have an office in Beijing. And that was a playbook out of David Stern's vision on how to grow the NBA, that you have to have to be on the ground. And tennis was an aspirational sport. It didn't take a lot of physical land. Government officials played it. It is gender neutral. Yep. So it was a welcome sport within China at the time. And so we established that office, and by the time I left in 2015, yes. We had sort of 2 events in China, and when I left, we had 6 to 7.
Wow. That's significant growth. Well, obviously, you also had Lena that kind of helped. And then
you had obviously, we had our Lena, but you can't build any business in any tennis tournament on one player. Sure. But she obviously was a catalyst and an inspiration then for the growth of tennis, the growth of women's tennis in APAC overall. Sure. Yes. Because she was Asia's Grand Slam champion. Everyone adorned her, and she's obviously the national hero in China. So that was good luck, but we have to be ready and optimized to take advantage of that good luck.
So was that your decision to open the office there? Was Lena already sort of on the horizon, or she was on the horizon, but she was at that time? Okay.
She didn't win. I think Roland Garros until 2011. Correct, and that had just sent it off the charts. So with China being a footprint, then further growth in Asia Pacific. And we have what are called the WTA World Tour Finals. And that event, prior to 2009, hadn't made any money. We were actually having to pay promoters to host it, and it's like the Super Bowl of the season for the WTA.
That's right.
So we were able to do a partnership with Qatar, and in 2009 to 11, and then 2012 to 14, 13 with Turkey, and that was a game changer.
And it also was in Singapore for a while, right? I can't remember the years. Right?
Yeah, and then there was the real transformation with Singapore and our partnership with the tourism group and sport. Yeah. Singapore Sport. And then it was transformational in that they shared our vision for a 10-day sport and entertainment event with all of the things that all events have today. I really tell everyone I'm in the entertainment business, right? And my genre of entertainment is world-class tennis and the world-class on-site experience where food and retail at the highest level is part of the offering. So and everything from we built more days of content. We built a Rising Star where youth, 14 to 16-year-olds from 21 countries had the opportunity in their own countries to earn the right to come to the World Tour Finals for the WTA Rising Stars and play on the same courts as the stars and mingle with the stars. We had an under-21 championships for the Rising Stars it was the Future Stars, and then the Rising Stars were under-21. And so again, building more content. And then there was music and galas. And I'm very proud of that event. It was an incredible partnership with Singapore. And then we opened up an office in Singapore. And that also became a footprint. And I know I don't have the right data point, but at the end of the day, I think there's now 27 events in Asia Pacific. So it's very important for the sport in obviously North America, very important in Europe, and then obviously now to have the footprint in Asia Pacific, it is a foundation. So when certain economies are ebbing and flowing, there's now much more diversity, and tennis is truly a global sport. So the footprint, prize money rose on the WTA tournaments 100% during my tenure.
What was the numbers? Because I don't have the numbers either. Do you roughly, it went from how much to what is it now?
Yeah, I don't have that. It's, but in the multiple millions, obviously. Yeah. I think total between now Grand Slams and WTAs is probably about 160 million, and the Slams make up about 50% of it. Okay. But it was very material, and then the WTA is made up of 50% player ownership and 50% tournaments. It's not like other leagues where it might be a player association, or as an NBA and in North American franchises, these are owner, and then there's unions for the athletes. So this is a 50-50. So tournaments are wholly owned. They own their, if you want to think of it as a franchise. Mm-hmm. And also during that time period, asset values grew 100%, and we monetized the media rights and created WTA Media with aggregation of content. Media rights were
Perform, right? Didn't it? The deal was Perform, right?
Or... It was Perform, and that was a big play, and we'd done the RFP, and I
remember that.
At the end of the day, that was a strategic play for them, tied to their business growth. And, the one thing that women's sports needs is oxygen, and that oxygen is cash.
Yeah,
and
that's true.
It's, you have that old sort of, you'd rather be market by market, trying to control your destiny, but doing it with a guarantee and doing it pan-regional with that party. For us, as from a business perspective at that time, it was really, really important for financial stability. So
right. And I do remember it. I'm not sure whether it's still running. I believe it.
It is. Yeah, they're working through some things. Obviously, been a big change up in media.
Yes, sure.
In data rights. Perform doesn't have the data rights, but the data rights are now. There's an RFP going for the data rights.
Interesting. And then the tour, the final actually moved to China now, right? If I recall, Singapore. Is it Shenzhen,
so again, that's right, to Shenzhen. So you've kind of built the business, and they did a $500 million deal for 10 years.
Yeah, I heard some of the numbers both in Singapore and in China, and they're significant for sure. Which is amazing.
And prize money has gone to $14 million. It's actually more than the ATP World Tour Finals, so we'll see.
Yeah, you're beating the men there in some of those instances. Now, before I want to move on to USTA, but before that, I want to talk a bit about the players. How do you see so that generation, which came through you or was there with you? How much were they different than previous generation, or was it? You think there's always a star, and it's just a question of who it is at that time?
Yes, I think we have cycles, whether it's men's tennis or women's tennis. And, from the founding of the WTA in 1973, Billie Jean founded it, but she really passed the baton to Chrissy and Martina.
Yep.
And they helped to really build the foundation. And then it came along Graf and Sellis. And then came along Lindsay Davenport, and then came along Serena, Venus, Clijsters, Henin, and now we're into the new millennium, and we've had this incredible journey of what I believe, and others have said it, doesn't really, what I believe, Mark, is those of the greats in the sport, that Serena Williams is the greatest of all time. Yep. And what she's been able to achieve in this modern era, not just on the titles and the longevity, and to come back from, dying maybe a couple times, complications with the birth, is just extraordinary. Yes. And then, just the whole with Venus, also multi-Grand Slam champion, the story is incredible.
The sisters, sure.
And so we've had that journey, and now we're in the midst of transition. We have some amazing young stars, and we've got the Haleps, the Ash Bardys, Osaka. Yeah. We've got the wonder young woman, Coco Gauff, and there's a host coming. So there's always someone. We just don't know who it's going to be.
Right.
And we all sort of go, oh, the sport is going to miss when they leave. What's going to happen to the sport? I can remember it in the Celis and the Graf days when they leave, and the next generations will come. And what we do know is that each generation propels the next generation to further greatness. Whether we saw Martina transform the athleticism, and Kim Clijsters and the Williams sisters then took it to a new level.
Absolutely.
And they continue to be fine-tuned as high-performance human beings on the court to get that extra edge, just like if we think about Formula One, everything that they do to get that little extra edge. Because at the end of the day, it's only the matter of a couple points, a couple of those pressure points. Yes. When you look at it at the scoreboard, might not tell the real, say 6-4, 6-4, but could have been very, very close. Just very, very close.
Totally. Let's switch heads. USTA, that obviously means men and women. So let's talk a bit about your role there. And really the first thing I'd love to talk about, of course, is you recently announced that the US Open will happen 24th to the August to the 13th of September, which is that the original date or did you move it a little bit?
Those are the U.S. Open original dates.
These are okay. That is the original date, right?
The main draw starts on August 31st, yes, through September 13th. So the difference is we will not have U.S. Open qualifying. Right. Okay. And that has been replaced with the Western and Southern Open, that is normally played 2 weeks before the U.S. Open in Cincinnati. Mm-hmm. And we've moved that event as part of the centralized operations plan to mitigate risk and to provide the athletes with competitive opportunities prior to the slam with the highest amount of prize money and ranking points. Right. And so it's a 4-week journey for us. Players opt in if they want to play the Western and Southern Open. They opt in if they want to play the U.S. Open. To be honest, they can come when they want. Right. But we're open for business on August the 16th. And so we'll take that from the 16th to the 13th of September.
And that was actually my first question on it. What's the opportunity for the players to prepare? Besides the tournament which you just mentioned, will there be other lead-up events, or is it literally some of them where you're going to walk up cold, so to speak?
Yeah, look, we know any athlete doesn't matter which sport we're talking about, they need to train, and they do need these pre-competitive opportunities, because training and match play, we just know the intensity is very different. There's something like the NHL is thinking about. Playoff hockey is at an intensity level unlike regular season. So how do the guys physically and mentally get to that space? Yes. It's the exact same parallel for our athletes. So announcing, and I think, Marcus, is for clarity, we have announced that we have an intent to play, and all engines are in full steam ahead now to prepare. Mm-hmm. We had needed to give notice to the athletes that based on what we know today, based on this medical and operational plan, we feel confident that we have mitigated risk for the health and well-being of all. So that's a signal for us to get operational and finish getting ready. 2, for them to get ready. And so that, many of them were training already. And now we see some exhibitions. Some have been in Europe. Some are happening here in the United States. Charleston just finished a 16-woman event. So that's kind of the start. And I think we have what's called World Team Tennis here in the U.S. Many players will play that. It's in a 3-week window in July. And then there'll be a men's Washington tournament the week before Western and Southern Open. that again will be held at the USTA Billie Jean King National Tennis Center, and then they'll have Cincy.
Right.
And again,
so
opening.
There is some warm up to it.
Yes.
Yeah,
provided those pre-competitive opportunities.
Now, you mentioned you made the announcement that you were trying to host it, I guess,
yes.
That's the plan. And I'm assuming what you mean with it is that what still happens till then, therefore, there's still a chance, I guess, that the event might not happen. Is that sort of the asterisk on it?
Yeah, I think all of us in sport who are attempting to return to play and or are returning to play, we all know that we're walking on eggshells every day.
Yes.
Because ultimately, there's one thing we cannot control in 100% certainty, and that's ultimately the virus. We can mitigate risk in the bubble world that we create, but there are environmental factors, societal factors where if the virus materially spikes, government officials and or ourselves, where we deem it's no longer that we can mitigate risk for the health and well-being for all, and that is a fundamental principle. It's the number one. We have three principles, but for me, it's number one, number two, number three. Then we will not be able to proceed, and that may come 4 weeks from now. It may come before the day before game day. It may come during the tournament. So those will be things that we all had to make that risk assessment and value and financial assessment prior to the decision to go. So we know eyes wide open. It's what we know today. Things are on track. The plan has been approved by the USTA Medical Advisory Group with world-class leading infectious disease specialists. It's been approved now by the New York State governor. I make this comment also, a lot of people say, well, why New York? That was the epicenter of the virus. Yep. And for those listeners internationally, I think those are very fair questions. And the athletes asked the question as well. The one thing that we can pay tribute to all of the New Yorkers, in particular the first responders and all the healthcare workers and everyone who put themselves on the line to care for everyone across New York State has been exceptional. And the governor has been very, very disciplined to be deliberate and slow before opening up the economy. So, New York,
that's what it appears. He gets a lot of airtime on TV.
Yes, New York State and New York City just started, we know as phase 2. And there's something called the RT value. It measures the spread of the virus.
Correct.
It's measured hourly across each state.
Wow.
And anything above 1.0 is where you ultimately don't want to be. This means for every one of us that has the virus, we're spreading it. Yes. And below is trending where we should be. So New York in the epicenter was above 4.
Wow.
And for the past several weeks, it has either been number 4 in the country, number 3 in the country. It's below 1, and other states are now starting to spike back up. California, Florida. And so it's going in the right direction. So again, Marcus, it's what we know today that gives us the confidence that we can implement the plan. And it also is a heavy lift by the athletes, and I think that's where we had a lot of the conversation with them.
Yeah. The next question here on my mind, of course, is your tournament is a global event, which means you have athletes from all over the world coming in, and that's the additional challenge, right? You don't just play on people who are already in the United States. What will be the restrictions there, or how much have you been able to work with the government to say, hey, anyone who, I guess there's certain things and it comes with certain clearance, will be allowed in, and therefore then will be housed and quarantined or whatever format that is. What was the process there? And to some degree, I guess is it the U.S. government, or who needs to give the green light on that level?
Sure. We have upwards of 75 to 80% of the playing competitors. They are international. So that is a dimension that the majority of sports are not dealing with. And we take very seriously the implications of athletes being able to get in and athletes being able to get out. And so it is quite complex on both sides. And at the moment, we have confidence again by speaking with governments that it is going to be possible for the athletes to come in and to leave. Now, on the U.S. side, on May 22nd, the federal government, through the Division of Homeland Security, made a proclamation for all international sports men and women, their coaches, tours. They could get into the country, that sport was of national interest. It was important to the economy. And we saw that happen right around when PGA Tour was in the final days of finalizing their plans. And we know the NBA and NHL and MLB. Mm-hmm. So international athletes have been coming in to the country for well over a month, and they're going to their training centers. And so the federal government has given us assurances of direct contact to the federal government. There's a process that we're working now with both tours to submit a list of all the athletes that we anticipate will come in and who they will bring. And we'll then submit that to the government by the end of this month. So that's how it will work. And then, literally they will come in and they'll come into the U.S. Open World, which in essence, you think of it like an athlete.
How does that look like?
Yeah, like an athlete's
How does
village.
the U.S. Open World look? Yeah. Oh, you have an athlete. You're going to set up an athlete village, basically.
Yeah, and our village will start in two centralized hotels where they will have everything they need, from medical to physio, fitness, recovery, entertainment, food service. And then there'll be shuttle buses to the USGA Billie Jean King National Tennis Center, which is where they will train. And they'll have all the same services. And the player experience will be enhanced on site for them to, whether it's creating a football pitch for them, a basketball court, golf simulations, gaming centers, outdoor cafes, all of that then will also be on the grounds. And
what type of testing will you be doing? Is there almost like a daily test routine, or before, after, kind of what is it? How the athletes, what can they expect coming?
At this time, based on the guidance of the medical advisors, the testing will be when they arrived at the hotel. Mm-hmm. It will be a PCR. Nasal swab test at the moment. That might change. Right. The lab will be right there in the hotel. Mm-hmm. Once they've completed their test, they'll be given their room key, and they'll be able to go to their room. And then they'll be asked to stay in their room until we have the results of their tests.
Okay.
At the moment, this sort of 2 to 3 hour window is expected for this particular test. Again, that may change. Right. Yep. And if it's a negative test, then they'll be tested again within 24 hours, and they'll have already been isolated. So the whole key on all of this is the mitigation of risk. Yes. And before they arrive, we'll be asking them through their pre-screening that they should be isolating and being mindful of their responsibility to their fellow athletes and themselves. If they're at home, stay in your home, train, and you shouldn't be going out to nightclubs and restaurants, and just be mindful of it. And get a COVID test before you leave, and then so that when they arrive, we've got a benchmark that they didn't have it then, and then they're getting another check, 3-4 days from when they had that test. And if they do have it, then they shouldn't get on the plane.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we've done a bit of work on it as well. We put together an entire series of programs, products, and services for events like yourself to help, from test kits to scanners at the gate, etc. What I've seen is really the combination of the blood test, which is the antibody test, together with the PCR. That's almost the perfect combo, because they do detect obviously different things, which I'm sure you would already know.
Yes.
So that's interesting. I mean, and you mentioned not partying, clubbing. I mean, today I think the news broke about Djokovic having been infected, and several other players around his tour. And clearly, at least again, what the stories look like, they really didn't take good care of it, and did exactly all the things you shouldn't be doing. So very bad example, and probably not a great publicity for the sport in general. So let's hope he recovers and gets well quickly to hopefully do come back to the Open. What's your thought on that? short one.
Yeah, look, I share your comment that we hope that all of the athletes recover well, and those who now have been infected by COVID through that particular exhibition, and I think what it does demonstrate to the athletes, because everyone has a different lens of COVID. Some are quite nervous about it. Some are taking it quite seriously, and others are more casual about it. And there's nothing casual about COVID. It's real.
Definitely. Yes.
And
I agree.
I think we're all returning to work in various and returning to society at different rates and at different comfort levels. And ultimately, the athletes are going to need to decide, and they'll need to decide sort of that 2 to 3 weeks before. But what can we do as we try to open up our offices in a traditional sense and open up professional sport? And that is, to have the mitigation plan to minimize risk, and that is obviously the medical side, the screening side, the testing side, having the isolation in place should one or more athlete test positive. We just had the experience last weekend on the PGA Tour. Second, it is critical on how we build it, and so we talk about the centralized, keeping everyone in the bubble. And then how you build the bubble. We'll have a multi-tiered system, 3 tiers. Tier 1, those are those interacting with players and limiting the number. Number 2 is they may interact. For example, that could be food service, security, the on-court camera people. And the 3rd tier would be those that should not interact with players. We'll have 700 broadcast staff working to distribute the pictures throughout the world, and they'll be in a broadcast center, and they'll have their own physical distancing and PPE protocols. And lastly, then how we lay out the spacing. Whether that say if the dining room normally can seat 250, it'll be 125. Where are the other seats going to be? A lot of outdoor cafes, food service now will be, they'll have an app and a QR code, and they'll just go on, they'll order their food, and they'll go to a station to pick up their single serve. And they'll all have to wear PPE. They'll have to wear their masks, and we just have to keep our 6 feet. CDC, we're learning every day. And if you keep yourself distanced and you keep your mask on, and you're not in a consistent exposure environment for 15 minutes, the risk is very, very minimal. And, stay in your exposure group versus, you can still have conversations 6 feet away, but people have to be mindful of it.
Will you have ball boys and girls on the court, or is that something maybe you've taken away?
Everything is going to be limited across all operations and competition. So we do have a limited crew of ball persons. They will not be kids. They will be 18 plus. And on the outer courts, we'll have 3, 1 at the net and 1 on each end. They will have a goggle on, and they will have some type of mask, and they will have gloves. They'll keep their 6 feet, and they won't interact with the athletes other than to roll the ball to them. No longer be involved in any handling of towels, water, bananas. They will not be interacting with the players that way.
Amazing.
And officials, we have 16 competition courts. 2 of them, Arthur Ashe, our main stadium, and Louis Armstrong, the second stadium. Those will be presented as we know today with linesmen. Again, they'll have some type of face shield. They'll have their goggles. They will have master gloves. And again, they're in
it's going to be a very different looking U.S. Open here for sure.
Yeah.
Wow. Sorry
and then we'll be using Hawkeye Live technology, where that replaces linespeople. On the outer courts, and so that'll be innovative and a new trial. And
I love that. We could spend probably another hour talking about the SOP, because it's obviously, I'm sure so much has gone in there, but I also conscious of our time here. I know you have a call coming up in a bit, but then I wanted a few more other points I wanted to kind of get into. So I was sorry to interrupt you there on this thought. 2 things I wanted to touch on. Spectators, which is obviously such a huge thing at the U.S. Open normally. They're really the heart and life of the event. And obviously you won't have any. But I recall, and the number maybe is wrong, so please correct me there. Your spectator, the average spectators at a previous U.S. Open is what, 700, 800,000 people who going through the gate. Is that correct? In that ballpark? Or
yeah, last year over the 2 weeks of main draw and the 1 week of qualifying that we now call Fan Week. Again, we could spend a lot of time on, again, how to grow content and the offering there. But 850,000.
Yeah, so I wasn't far off.
Yeah, it's the largest.
Yeah. So that's
annual,
a huge
it's the largest annual sport entertainment event in the world because it's annual.
Yeah. Correct. Yeah, it's huge numbers, which means also huge revenue, not just the tickets they buy. They buy the hot dog and the ice cream and everything. So. And saying and deciding we were obviously not going to let anyone in. That's a huge decision. How did the short version of how did you guys decide on that? It was just was it the government saying, look, you can have the event, but you can't let spectators in, or was it more? How was the decision made on that?
Look, I think we could come back to sort of the guiding principle of how do we mitigate risk and health and well-being for all, and that includes all. Normally we have 11,000 people credentialed working at the U.S. Open. It's like its own city for a month, and plus as we build it, and it's just not possible. You've got mass transit, so we were already down the path of no fans on site, and certainly the New York governor, I think, has released his protocols for all sport, where at the moment no fans in stadiums will be allowed. So
in general,
but we were already in that operational business model to do that, and it's not an easy decision. There's no other stadium in the world like Arthur Ashe with 24,000 allowed New Yorkers. If there's a silver lining, I'm not going to have someone call me to say, Stacey, the players can't hear the umpire. Can you quiet them down? Oh yeah, I'll get right on that. Yeah, we'll tell them to be quiet. No problem.
and that's a great segue into my next question. Are you doing anything that's say unique, interesting you can already share from a technology point of view? Like, I'll give you an example. Bundesliga, my German football league.
Yes.
They had on the international feed or even the local feed, they pumping in crowd sounds, right? And so this is obviously artificial crowd sounds. You have some stadiums now. They're obviously dressing up the stands with fan images or other things, cutouts, etc. I mean, you've seen. I'm sure you've seen all those examples. Is there anything interesting you can share with us of what you guys are planning to do, or is it going to be a bit of a surprise?
Well, I think one of the benefits we have is that we now get to learn from the Bundesliga, PGA Tour, and others because they've gone first. And I must say, a silver lining from COVID, the entire sports industry has united to share because we all want to return to play if it's safe in our countries, and everyone has been incredibly collaborative. And I just have to give a shout out to Christian Seaford at the Bundesliga. From day one, he has been all in to support all of us and openly sharing. And he's been also a cheerleader, like with my team, getting on the phone and going through
that's awesome.
that journey. So yes, to your question, I think we're looking at all of that. We have a working group that's aligned with ESPN, because the show and how we present the show for the virtual engagement on air, online, with social will come a lot from the content being generated by ESPN. And we're looking at all those things. How do we, do we have the LED boards with the fans? Do you have some cutouts? Do you 24,000 seats? Are we going to tarp some of those off to improve how it looks, dress them up? Sound is obviously a big one. The Hear Me Cheer app or others, where actually fans can be screaming into their iPhones, and that is being pumped into the stadium. So all of those things are being worked on, but they're also an opportunity for a traditional sport like us. We don't tend to innovate that much. The U.S. Open prides itself on innovation. So it may be new camera angles that we haven't been able to use before, because they would have been seat kills, and that's normally where we would be generating revenue. So I'm actually quite excited about this opportunity to see ultimately what our team creates.
Yeah. Have you ever done, as a U.S. Open, have you used VR already? Is it something you've looked at before?
Well, we have not used VR. No.
Right.
We've dabbled with it, and I've always dreamt of the 360. To have that courtside seat. Like, there's nothing like courtside seats in any sport.
Exactly.
While tennis is off the charts, and that's what seeing tennis live is an exceptional experience. Not just a complete offering of the entertainment that we talked about earlier, but you can really see and hear and feel the power and the spin and the athleticism. Sometimes sport via television doesn't give you that same appreciation. Absolutely. And I have never in my 30-plus year career ever had to give anyone their money back because they came to tennis. They maybe didn't see that star they hoped they were seeing, but they saw unbelievable world-class tennis, and they just had a new appreciation for the athleticism of the athletes.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. It's and I think it's to some degree for every sport. Sure. Live is just so different, and that's why VR and other things like this, which bring it a little closer to that actual live experience, is so exciting. I love that technology. Maybe we'll have another conversation about that next time here.
Okay.
But we need to unfortunately wrap it up. Really, I could keep talking with you for another hour. But what I'd love to hear from you, maybe as sort of your parting words to us, as you said, you've been 30 years now in the world of tennis. Where do you see the next 30? With, esports coming on strong, the younger generation maybe less inclined to go and swing rackets or other sports. Where do you see it? Where do you think the world will be heading there? Well,
again, if we go back to David Stern. I in my youth, early days of professional career, I was ravenous to read about the NBA and learn from him. And later in my career, I had the privilege to get to know him a little bit and be in my corner when things were going tough on some geopolitical issues and world leaders, with racist and sexist comments against some of my athletes. So he always was an external visionary, and you build the product based on your fans. Tennis needs to get there. We're an insular sport. We don't really build our product for fans, and I do hope that ultimately we can, with new leaders and we can be visionary to be externally focused to compete in the sport and entertainment industry, because we're going to need to, because it is highly competitive and will only get more competitive.
Absolutely.
And so esports, digital, we haven't cracked the code yet. And we know that is a hard industry to play in. We know gamers are an entirely different profile than those who attend live sport. The one area of opportunity, I think when it was Nintendo brought out Wii Tennis at the beginning, or Pong, right? Tennis was a primary, and then so we know there's a foundation there for it, and how do we optimize it? And we just, as a sport, haven't got there yet. We kind of talked about it and dabbled, and I look at it also possibly from a participation perspective, because the USTA is the national sport governing body. US Open is the means to the end. How do we live in the physical world for youth and get them active, but also there is just the reality that they're in the digital world. And so with AI technology, can we teach them how to play tennis? They can actually have their physical lesson with their coach and then return home and with gamification, actually learn how to hit that forehand through AI technology and play against their friends. Because that's ultimately what esports is, right? It's gaming and social community on the virtual platform. So it's figuring out, and the technologies are there. I just don't think we've 100% optimized them. Look, we look at the Olympic Games, looking at esports, colleges or esports sponsorship. We will. We'll go there. It's just we're not leading in that area. It's going to be very, very fascinating. But one thing we can't lose: youth need to be physically active for their health, not just to play sport, but it helps with their physical health, their mental health, their emotional health, and their ability to be good citizens, because they have to learn teamwork and socialization. Cooperation, and those are all of the intangible skills that we need with our future leaders. We will be a more robotic society, but robots have one thing: they don't feel, and they will never be able to replace the emotional intelligence that humans will have, and sport and activity and music, things that are quite physical. We just need our youth to be doing that. So that's fundamental.
Absolutely. And those are great final words there. Stacey, thank you so much for the hour here. I loved it. I enjoyed it. I wish you all the best. And I do hope the US Open will happen. Unlikely that I'll be there this year, but I will cheer from the sidelines from here in Asia. And we'll watch you. And as I said, wish you and your team all the best, and looking forward to connecting again in the future. Thank
you, Marcus. And thanks for everything you've done, for our sport during COVID. You too have been a leader, reaching out and sharing across the globe. So thank you for that as well.
Yeah, thank you. We all do our part.
We're all doing our part. Exactly.
Well, exactly. Have a great morning there in New York City.
Okay.
I'll talk to you soon.
Cheers.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
The Sports Entrepreneurs by Marcus Luer podcasts are a collection of interviews and stories. All content in this podcast is the copyright of Marcus Luer. Reproduction and distribution of the presentation without written permission of the owner is prohibited. All rights reserved.